The enemy commander pressed his boot against the chest of the wounded American soldier and laughed. He keyed his radio and told his men, "Let them call for help. Nobody is coming." He had already jammed their communications, already sealed every exit route, already positioned his fighters on the high ground. He believed he had won. He believed the Americans were finished. He believed nobody was watching. He was wrong about all three. If this kind of story moves you, subscribe to this channel and follow every word to the end, and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. Chief Warrant Officer Ethan Walker had survived things that would break most people. He had survived a helicopter going down in the mountains of Afghanistan. He had survived 3 days alone in enemy territory with a broken arm and 2 rounds of ammunition left. He had survived ambushes, betrayals, friendly fire incidents, and the kind of missions that never appear in any official record because the government would rather the world not know they happened at all. I was not the kind of man who panicked. He was not the kind of man who froze. He was not the kind of man who let his team see him afraid. But standing inside that canyon in northern Arizona at 11:17 in the evening, listening to the silence where his satellite communications used to be, Ethan Walker felt something he had not felt in 15 years of active combat. He felt the specific suffocating weight of a trap closing around him. "Martinez," he said, quietly, keeping his voice level even though every instinct in his body was screaming. "Tell me you have something." Corporal Danny Martinez, 26 years old, the youngest member of the 4-man SEAL reconnaissance team, pressed the handset against his ear one more time. He listened. He adjusted the frequency. He checked the battery pack even though he had already checked it 4 times in the last 20 minutes. Then he set the radio down on the ground and looked up at Ethan. "Nothing, Chief. It's like we're in a dead zone, but it's not natural. Somebody's doing this to us." "I know," Ethan said, and he already knew. The moment their satellite uplink went dark, he had understood what was happening. This was not a technical failure. Equipment failed in patterns. It degraded it, stuttered it, gave you warning signs before it died. This had been instant, total, like someone had reached up into the sky and turned off a switch. Someone with the capability to jam military-grade communications equipment was out there in those mountains. And that meant tonight had just become something far more dangerous than a reconnaissance mission. "Chief," that was Marcus Reed, the team medic, speaking in a low, careful voice from Ethan's left. "I need you to come look at Bravo." Ethan crossed the 6 feet between them without another word. Sergeant First Class Bushes Bravo Holloway was lying against the canyon wall with his back propped up at an angle. He was 34 years old. He had a wife named Karen in San Diego and twin daughters who were 5 years old and had just learned to ride bicycles. Ethan knew these facts because he made it his business to know the personal details of every man he led into danger. He believed it made him more careful with their lives. James Holloway had taken a piece of shrapnel through his left side during the ambush that hit them 40 minutes earlier. It had entered below his ribs and was currently sitting somewhere near his kidney. He was conscious, but barely. His face was the color of old paper. "Talk to me," Ethan said. Marcus did not waste words. "He needs surgery. Not tomorrow, tonight." He paused. "Within the next couple hours, or we're going to lose him." Ethan nodded once. He stood up. He looked at the canyon walls rising around him on 3 sides. He looked at the narrow pass to the south, which was the only ground-level exit route, and which was currently being held by an unknown number of enemy fighters who had shown exactly zero hesitation about shooting at American Special Operations personnel. He thought about the helicopter that was supposed to be their extraction platform. The helicopter that had aborted 60 minutes ago when 2 rocket-propelled grenades had come out of nowhere and forced the pilot to break off contact and retreat to a safe distance. He thought about all of this in roughly 4 seconds. Then he turned back to Marcus. "How much time exactly?" 2 hours, maybe a little more if I can stabilize the bleeding. "But Chief, I'm working with field kit. I'm doing everything I can, and it's not going to be enough." "Understood." Ethan turned to Martinez. "How's our ammunition?" Martinez had been running the count in his head. 3 magazines between the 4 of us. 60 rounds total, give or take. Whatever we've got in our sidearms. 60 rounds, 4 men. An enemy that had the high ground had jammed their communications, had sealed their primary exit, and had already demonstrated the willingness and capability to launch a coordinated attack in the dark. 60 rounds was not a fighting number. 60 rounds was a last stand number. Ethan sat down on the ground. He put his rifle across his knees. He stared at the canyon walls above him for a long moment. "All right," he said, "let's think about this." And that was the moment Martinez spoke the words that Ethan had been dreading. "Chief, movement on the North Ridge." Every head turned. Above them, against the dark sky, there were shapes moving. Not a lot of them, but enough to tell Ethan that whatever force was out there in those mountains, they were repositioning, shifting their angle, setting up for something. "How many?" Ethan asked. "I count 6, maybe 7. Could be more that I can't see." "They're getting ready," Marcus said. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, "they are." He had commanded enough missions to recognize the tactical signature of what he was looking at. The enemy had contained them, cut off their communications, and was now methodically putting assets in place to eliminate them. This was a professional operation. Whoever was running it had done this before. Whoever had designed this trap was patient, organized, and confident. They had every reason to be confident. The SEAL team was bottled up in a canyon with no communications. One critically wounded man, 60 rounds of ammunition, and nowhere to go. But here was the thing about Ethan Walker that even the people who had served with him for years sometimes forgot. He did not accept the premises of the situation he was given. He never had, not once in 15 years. "Martinez," he said, "tell me everything you can see on that North Ridge, every detail. Position, spacing, equipment, if you can make it out." "Chief, even if I map them perfectly, we don't have the rounds to fight our way through that position." "I know, I'm not asking you to fight them. I'm asking you to tell me what you see. Every detail matters tonight." Martinez raised his scope and started talking. He described what he could see, slowly, carefully, the way a man describes something he knows is important without knowing exactly why yet. The positions, the spacing, the way the fighters were moving, where they were setting up, which angles they were trying to cover. Ethan listened to every word, and somewhere in the back of his mind, behind the tactical calculations and the ammunition count, in the timeline Marcus had given him for Holloway's survival, he kept thinking about something else, something someone had said to him 3 days ago, a voice, a sentence. "When everything fails, Chief, you won't need to believe in me. You'll only need to know I'm there." He hadn't thought much of it at the time. He was thinking about it now. 3 days earlier, at 0600 hours, a new intelligence specialist had been attached to their unit, Captain Emily Carter, 32 years old, former Army Ranger sniper, 18 months embedded with a Joint Special Operations Task Force in Eastern Europe. Before that, 2 years as a targeting officer for a classified drone strike program. Before that, 4 years of Army Ranger qualification, which she had completed as one of the first women to do so, and which she had done by outscoring 60% of her male counterparts on the final assessment. Her file was impressive. Her record was genuinely remarkable. On paper, Captain Emily Carter was exactly the kind of specialist you wanted attached to a unit operating in complex terrain. But her file hadn't been the thing that caused problems. The problems had started the moment she walked into the unit's operations center, and Sergeant First Class Holloway had said loud enough for half the room to hear, "They sent us a Ranger, no offense, Captain, but we do a little more than throw grenades and do push-ups in training." Emily Carter had looked at Holloway for exactly 2 seconds. Then she had said, "How many confirmed long-range engagements?" Holloway had blinked. "What long-range engagements? Confirmed. How many do you have?" Holloway's jaw tightened. 7 confirmed over the course of 4 deployments. "I have 19, she said, confirmed over 32 months of active deployment. So whenever you're ready to have this conversation about qualifications, I'm happy to keep going. But if we're done, I'd like to look at the mission brief." The room had gone very quiet. Ethan had watched the whole exchange from his desk in the corner of the room, and he had felt 2 things simultaneously. The first was a sharp, reluctant respect for the way she had handled that moment without raising her voice or losing her composure. The second was a practical worry, because whatever Emily Carter's qualifications looked like on paper, she hadn't run a mission with this specific unit yet, and he didn't know how she operated under real pressure. He had pulled her aside afterward. "Captain," he had said, "I want to be straight with you. Whatever you've done before, whatever your numbers are, I've got 3 men I'm responsible for bringing home. That's my priority." She had met his eyes without flinching. "Mine too, Chief. I'm not sure you understand what I'm saying." "I do understand. You're telling me you'll trust what I do more than what I say." "I'm okay with it." She paused. When everything fails, Chief, you won't need to believe in me. You'll only need to know I'm there. He had walked away from that conversation without knowing what to do with her. She was confident, but confidence wasn't the same as competence when bullets were coming at you in the dark. She was qualified on paper, but qualifications were what people had before real missions tested them. He had assigned her to the observation post on the high ground above the mission area. It was an important role, but it was also separated from the main element, which meant she would be operating independently if anything went wrong. He had made that assignment partly because her position genuinely required someone with long-range precision capability. He had also made it, if he was honest with himself, because it kept her away from the part of the mission he was most worried about. And he hated that he had done it. He had told himself it was tactical logic, but somewhere underneath that logic was a question he hadn't fully faced. Did he trust her? He hadn't answered that question honestly before the mission launched. Now sitting in the canyon at 11:17 at night with no communications and 60 rounds of ammunition and a dying teammate and enemy fighters moving into position on the ridge above him, the question had changed entirely. It wasn't whether he trusted Emily Carter anymore. It was whether she was even alive. The explosion that had separated her from the team had been massive. A shaped charge buried in the approach route designed to trigger a landslide. It had gone off approximately 300 meters behind them as they entered the valley. At the time, Ethan had made a fast and brutal calculation. The debris field was between them and their observation post position, which meant Carter was either already at her post and safe, or she was caught in the slide. Either way, he couldn't stop the mission to find out. That was the reality of special operations work. You made decisions under incomplete information, and you lived with them. And sometimes living with them meant knowing that someone you were responsible for might be in trouble and being unable to do anything about it. He had told himself she was at the post. He had told himself she was watching. He was not sure he believed either of those things. Chief Martinez said quietly, breaking the silence, "Yeah, they're almost set up." Ethan looked at the north ridge again. The shapes were settling into position, finding their angles, getting comfortable. They were going to attack. Not immediately, probably in the next 30 to 40 minutes. They would wait for the best positioning, and then they would come down into the canyon from above and from the south simultaneously, and with 60 rounds of ammunition and one man down, the outcome of that contact was not something Ethan allowed himself to put into words. "Marcus," he said, "Chief, is there anything you can do to get Holloway mobile, even partially?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, not because he didn't have an answer, because he was working through whether the answer was going to be useful. "I can give him something that'll get him on his feet for maybe 20 minutes. After that, he's going to be worse off than he is now. A lot worse." "Save it for now," Ethan said. "Last option." "Understood." Ethan pressed his back against the canyon wall and looked up at the sky. Clear night, stars everywhere. From up here, he knew you could see for miles in every direction. The kind of visibility that made a skilled marksman extraordinarily dangerous. He thought about Emily Carter. He thought about what she had said. He thought about 19 confirmed long-range engagements. I thought about the way she had looked at him without flinching and said, "When everything fails, you won't need to believe in me. You'll only need to know I'm there." He had dismissed it at the time as the kind of thing people said when they wanted to sound confident before they'd been tested. But he was remembering now that confidence without foundation didn't usually come packaged that calmly. It didn't usually come with specifics. It didn't usually look you directly in the eye without a single trace of the need to be believed. "Martinez," he said, "Chief, give me a distance to the farthest position on that ridge, the one furthest north." Martinez looked through his scope. 800, maybe 850 meters. Hard to tell exactly in this light. 800 to 850 meters. In a low-light environment, against a moving target, at altitude with wind variables. That was not a shot most people could make. That was not a shot most trained snipers could make consistently in field conditions without preparation. That was the kind of shot that required a specific, rare, deeply practiced capability. 19 confirmed long-range engagements. He found himself wondering exactly how long those shots had been. And then he stopped wondering. Because wondering wasn't useful. What was useful was the question of what to do with 60 rounds and 3 capable men and 1 dying teammate in 30 minutes before the final assault came down. What was useful was thinking through every angle every option, every possibility, no matter how unlikely. He was halfway through that process when Martinez went completely rigid. Ethan saw it instantly. He had been working with Martinez long enough to read his body language the way other people read text. And what he was reading right now was not danger. It was something rarer. It was confusion. Chief, Martinez said, and his voice had a quality in it that Ethan hadn't heard before. Something between disbelief and the very early edge of something like hope, which was the most dangerous emotion you could feel in a combat situation because hope without basis got people killed. Chief, I'm watching the ridge. What about it? Position 5, the one on the far left. Martinez paused. He watched for another 3 seconds. He's down. Ethan's head came up immediately. Enemy fire friendly. What happened? I don't know. He was there and then he was gone. And I didn't hear anything from our side. We didn't fire anything. Martinez adjusted his scope, watched again, pressed himself into stillness the way only combat veterans can, with a complete disciplined quieting of everything except observation. Then, position 3, he's down too. Ethan was on his feet. Marcus said, what's happening? I don't know yet, Ethan said. But something was happening. That was certain. Something was happening on that ridge that nobody had planned for, and in the zero-sum equation of a combat situation. Anything that took down enemy fighters without costing you ammunition was not a coincidence. It was not random. It was not equipment failure. It was someone. Someone on the ridge. Someone the enemy hadn't accounted for. Someone who was shooting from a position the enemy hadn't identified. Ethan picked up the damaged emergency frequency transceiver that Martinez had been trying to coax into partial function for the last 20 minutes. It was not good enough for two-way voice communication. It was barely good enough to receive a signal at all. But it had been picking up fragments, pieces of something. Enough to know there was a transmission somewhere on a frequency close to theirs. He pressed it to his ear. Static, more static. And then through the static, fragmentary and broken and barely there, but absolutely unmistakably present, something that sounded like a voice. A calm voice, a woman's voice. His throat tightened. Alpha Team, this is Ghost 1. He stopped breathing. You are 3 meters from my firing line. The canyon was completely silent. Move left. And Chief Warrant Officer Ethan Walker, who had survived 15 years of things that should have killed him, who had never frozen under fire, who had made the hardest tactical decisions imaginable without hesitation, stood in the dark in the bottom of that canyon and did not move for exactly 4 seconds because he was not sure what he was hearing was real. Then Marcus grabbed his arm. Ethan, move left, now. And Ethan moved. All 3 of them moved. Holloway, half-conscious, was dragged 4 feet to the left by Marcus, who moved with the precise, urgent efficiency of a man who understood that the physics of their situation had just changed in a way he didn't fully understand, but was absolutely prepared to trust. They moved left, and then from somewhere far above them, somewhere on the high ground, that the enemy had been so certain was inaccessible, there was a sound, a single shot, clean and precise, and carrying across the canyon like something inevitable, followed by silence. Then another shot, then another. Ethan pressed himself against the canyon wall and raised his scope to the north ridge and watched as position after position went dark, one by one, patient, methodical. The way someone works who is not rushing, not panicking, not reacting to pressure. The way someone works when they are completely, absolutely in control of everything within their reach. 12 seconds. That was how long it took. He counted. 12 seconds. He keyed the transceiver. He barely believed he was doing it. He barely believed what he was about to say made any sense at all. Emily, silence on the frequency, then so calm it almost made him angry, the calm of someone who had never doubted the outcome for a single moment. Still here, Chief. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Martinez let out a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a soup, and was entirely understandable. Marcus, crouching over Holloway, said very quietly, I'll be damned. And Ethan Walker, for the first time in what felt like weeks, exhaled, because she had been there the whole time, watching, waiting, doing the job she had promised to do when nobody around her had believed she could do it. Not as a symbol, not to prove a point, not because she needed anyone to acknowledge anything, but because three men were trapped in a canyon, and she was the one person on the mountain who could reach them. And Emily Carter was not the kind of person who left people behind. The frequency crackled again. Chief, I have visual on your position. I also have eyes on enemy movement to your south. They don't know I'm here yet, but that's going to change in the next few minutes when their guys on the ridge stop checking in. A pause. I need you to be ready to move. What's your status? He asked. Another pause. Shorter this time. I've been better, she said. Let's get your team home first, and we can talk about that later. He didn't push her on it, partly because she was right, getting the team home was the priority. Partly because the way she said it told him something he needed to know without her saying it directly. She was hurt. She was functioning clearly, but she was hurt, and she had been hurt for some time, and she had kept going anyway. He had sent her to that observation post 3 days ago, with a quiet, unspoken doubt in his mind about whether she could handle what the mission became. He was not sure he could have done what she had done. He was not sure anyone could have. But she had. And now she was on the radio, injured and alone at the highest point in the canyon, calmly giving him tactical guidance like she was reading from a situation report, and the team that everyone above his pay grade had written off 40 minutes ago was still breathing and still fighting. Copy that, Ghost One, he said. Then he turned to his team. You heard her, he said. We get ready to move. Martinez nodded. Marcus was already adjusting Holloway's position, preparing to help him move on Ethan's signal. And Ethan Walker stood in the canyon and felt the situation shift under his feet the way a river shifts its channel after a flood. Not fixed, not finished, not safe. There was still an enemy out there and still a long way between them and extraction, and still a man who needed a surgeon in the next couple of hours. But the trap had a hole in it now, and the hole had been made by the person he had doubted. He looked up at the ridge. He couldn't see her from here. He couldn't see any trace of where she was, or how she had gotten there, or what she had already survived to reach that position. But she was there. She had always been there, and that he realized was the only thing that had ever mattered. The radio crackled one more time and then went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that meant the transmission had ended cleanly. The kind of quiet that meant the frequency had degraded again, slipping back into static, and whatever fragile connection had existed between Ethan Walker and the woman on the ridge above him had just become something he could not count on holding. He stared at the transceiver in his hand. Martinez was watching him. Marcus was watching him. Even Holloway, barely conscious and running on whatever reserves of will he had left, had opened his eyes and was watching him with the particular attention of a man who understands that the next decision made in the next 30 seconds is going to determine whether he ever sees his daughters again. She's still up there, Martinez asked. She's still up there, Ethan confirmed. How bad is she hurt? She didn't say. That's not an answer. No, Ethan agreed, it's not. He set the transceiver down and picked up his rifle. The weight of it was familiar in his hands, the way breathing was familiar. He had carried a weapon in dangerous places for so long that the absence of one felt stranger than the presence. He looked at the North Ridge again. The positions that had been occupied 3 minutes ago were empty now. The fighters that had been settling into those slots, preparing their angles, coordinating their timing for the final assault, they were gone. Not retreated, gone. Which meant Emily Carter, from a position nobody had identified and nobody had believed was reachable, had taken down multiple armed fighters in the span of 12 seconds, with what Ethan strongly suspected was a single rifle and whatever ammunition she had managed to carry up a mountain after surviving a landslide. I had questions about all of that. He was going to ask every single one of them the moment his team was safe and she was standing in front of him with both feet on the ground. Right now he had other problems. They're going to figure out something's wrong in the next 4 to 5 minutes, he said, keeping his voice low and steady. When their guys on the ridge stop checking in, the commander down here is going to know. And when he knows, he's either going to pull back to reassess or he's going to accelerate the assault before he loses any more ground. Which one? Marcus asked. Based on what I've seen tonight, he accelerates. This is a commander who planned this op down to the minute. He's not going to let it unravel without pushing hard. So we've got 4 minutes, maybe less. And she's got eyes on the South Passage. She said she does. Martinez exhaled slowly. Chief, I want to ask you something. Ask. Do you actually believe she can hold that position long enough for us to find an exit? Because I'm doing the math up here, and the math requires her to be in the right place at the right time with enough ammunition to... Martinez, Ethan said. Yeah. She told us to be ready to move, so let's be ready to move. Martinez looked at him for a moment, not pushing back, processing. He was 26 years old and he was very good at his job, and he was scared in the way that smart, competent people get scared when they can see the full shape of what they're up against. He nodded once. Okay, he said. Okay, yeah, ready to move. Marcus had already shifted Holloway into a position that could become mobile with minimal transition time. He had improvised a support structure using his own body as the primary brace, which meant when they moved, he was going to be carrying most of Holloway's weight on his left side while keeping his right hand free for his sidearm. It was not elegant. It was not textbook. It was exactly the kind of solution that only comes from someone who has done this before and knows that textbook solutions are what you reach for when you have time, and field solutions are what you reach for when you don't. Marcus, Ethan said, ready. How long can you hold that position on the move? Depends on the terrain. If it's flat, 20 minutes at pace. If we're climbing, 10. Either way, he needs surgery in 90 minutes. I know. So we're not walking out of this canyon. Marcus met his eyes. I know that too. Ethan turned the situation over in his mind one more time. The transceiver was barely functional. Emily had given him visual contact and tactical guidance and taken down the North Ridge position. But the South Passage, their only ground-level exit, was still under enemy control. She had eyes on it. She had said she had eyes on it. But eyes on and the ability to clear it were two very different things. And he didn't know what she had left in terms of ammunition or physical capacity or the specific positioning she was working from. I didn't know, and he couldn't ask her because the frequency had degraded. And so he was operating on the most fundamental form of trust there was. Not the trust you build over years of shared missions and shared meals and shared near-death experiences. The trust that you extend to a person in a single irreversible moment because the situation demands it, and everything you've seen tells you it's not unreasonable. I thought about the way she had stood in the operations center and listed her 19 confirmed engagements without anger, without showing off, just the facts delivered with the calm of someone who had nothing to prove and knew it. He picked up the transceiver one more time. Ghost 1, Alpha Team. If you can hear this, we are preparing to move in 90 seconds. Advise on South Passage status. Static, more static. He set it down. We move on my signal, he said to the team. Martinez, you have point. I have the rear. Marcus, you're in the middle with Holloway. If we get contact, you keep moving. You do not stop. Understood. Understood, Marcus said immediately. Martinez. On point. Got it. One more thing. He paused. He looked at each of them. Whatever happens in the next 20 minutes, you hold together. You stay tight, you trust each other, and you trust the person on the ridge. Neither of them said anything, but he saw it in both of their faces, the specific quality of attention that soldiers give when they have moved past fear into something cleaner and harder. The place where you stop calculating outcomes and start executing actions. The place where training and trust and the stubborn refusal to quit all converge into something that doesn't have a clean name but keeps people alive when nothing else does. He checked his rifle one final time. Then something happened that Ethan had not anticipated. The frequency came back, not clean, not stable, but back. And the voice that came through it was different from 3 minutes ago. Still controlled, still precise, but with something underneath it now, a quality of strain of effort, of someone transmitting, while also managing something painful that they were choosing not to mention. Alpha Team, Ghost 1, South Passage has 5 contacts, 3 stationary, 2 mobile. I have a line on the stationary positions. A breath, short, controlled. I cannot give you a clear lane with what I have left. Not from this angle. Ethan pressed the transceiver hard. Copy that. Alternate approach. A pause. He could feel the weight of it. The weight of someone doing mathematics in their head that was partly tactical and partly personal. Running calculations that included their own condition as a variable. They were trying not to overweight. There's a drainage channel. West face of the canyon runs north-south below the main wall. It's narrow, single file. It bypasses 2 of the 3 stationary contacts. Another breath. It also runs within 40 meters of the mobile patrol route. She wants us to go through a drainage channel within 40 meters of a patrol, Martinez said quietly. Yeah, Ethan said. And if the patrol's timing is off by 30 seconds in either direction. I know. Chief. Martinez, what is the other option? Martinez looked at the South Passage, looked at the ridge, looked at Holloway. He didn't say anything else. Ghost 1, Ethan said. Give us the entry point. She gave it to them. Precise. Fast. The coordinates of the drainage channel entry point and the bearing they needed to hold, and the approximate timing window based on the patrol pattern she had been observing for the last. He almost couldn't believe what she said next, the last 14 hours. 14 hours. She had been watching that patrol pattern for 14 hours. Alone. Injured. Without communications. Without support. While the SEAL team below her had been contained and had slowly run out of options. Emily Carter had been alone on the high ground, doing exactly what she was trained to do, and doing it without anyone knowing she was alive, and doing it with the patience of someone who understood that the moment had to be right, or it was worth nothing. 14 hours. He didn't let himself sit with that number. There was no time. He filed it somewhere in the back of his mind and told himself he would deal with what it meant later, and he turned to his team. Drainage channel west face, let's go. They moved. The transition from stillness to movement in a combat situation has a particular quality to it that is almost impossible to describe to someone who has never experienced it. It is not like standing up from a chair. It is the activation of every trained instinct simultaneously, the body and mind shifting from one operating mode to another in a fraction of a second, leaving behind everything that is not immediately relevant and bringing forward everything that is. Ethan felt it happen in his muscles before his mind had fully finished processing the command to move. Martinez was already at the west wall, moving low and quiet, finding the channel entry, the way someone finds a thing they've been told about clearly enough that they can orient to it without seeing it first. Marcus had Holloway moving. Whatever Holloway was feeling, he was not communicating it. His jaw was set. His eyes were forward. He was breathing in a way that told Ethan he was managing significant pain with the specific, compressed discipline of a man who has decided that consciousness is non-negotiable until he gets somewhere safe. Ethan covered the rear. He kept his eyes on the South Passage, on the North Ridge, on every angle that mattered. The canyon was quiet, too quiet. I had been in enough situations to know what the silence before an assault felt like. It had a specific texture, a specific weight, like the air was holding its breath. He had felt it tonight already before Emily had taken down the North Ridge position. And he was feeling something like it now, though, with a different quality. Less imminent, more uncertain. Like the enemy had lost their rhythm and were in the process of finding it again. Which meant the window was real, but it was not permanent. Moving at Martinez said quietly from the front of the column, they entered the drainage channel, single file, low. The channel was narrow enough that their shoulders nearly touched the walls on either side. Holloway's breathing was audible now in the confined space, and Marcus was making adjustments to his support position every few steps without breaking stride. The automatic recalibrations of someone who has spent years carrying the weight of other people's survival on their literal body. Ethan counted his steps. He kept the count in the front of his mind as a grounding mechanism, a way to hold the tactical picture without losing himself in the noise of everything that could go wrong. 40 steps. 50. The channel was leading them southwest away from the direct enemy contact zones, and every step increased the distance between Holloway and the situation that was killing him by fractions of a degree. 70 steps. Then Martinez stopped. Not suddenly. He slowed first, which was the signal, slowed then stopped, then raised one hand in the flat palm hold signal. Ethan was at his shoulder in 3 seconds. Patrol Martinez breathed, 15 meters, moving west to east along the channel edge. Ethan looked. There were 2 figures moving along the top of the channel embankment, walking at a steady pace, not alert, more searching, doing the routine low-attention work of a patrol that has been running on the same pattern for hours and has stopped expecting anything to be different. Their window was approximately 20 seconds. If the patrol held its pace and didn't deviate, they would pass the channel entry point above and move east, and the team would have a clear 30-second gap to continue moving. If the patrol slowed or stopped or looked down, or if Holloway made a sound, Ethan turned and looked back at Marcus. Marcus had already seen it. He had pulled Holloway against the channel wall and had his hand gently carefully with the specific professional tenderness of a medic who has learned that comfort and tactical necessity are not always different things pressed lightly over Holloway's mouth. Not to silence him forcibly, to communicate without words. Holloway's eyes met Marcus's eyes, and something passed between them that was partly training and partly the kind of nonverbal trust you develop between people who have depended on each other in dangerous places. Holloway went completely still. The patrol moved overhead. 8 seconds, 12 seconds, 15. The footsteps continued east without breaking rhythm. Ethan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Go," he said. They moved again. 90 steps later, Martinez held up his hand again, but this time it wasn't a stop signal. It was a direction signal. He was pointing up and to the right toward the channel exit point, a narrow gap in the embankment that opened onto a flat stretch of ground that was, according to the coordinates Emily had given them, outside the primary enemy containment perimeter. Outside, the word had a weight to it. They climbed out of the channel one at a time. Martinez first clearing the immediate area. Then Ethan helped Marcus bring Holloway up, the three of them working in the compact, efficient choreography of a team that has run enough evolutions together to do it without verbal coordination. They were out. Ethan looked at the terrain around them and felt for the first time in hours like the geometry had changed in their favor. They were no longer contained. They were exposed in the open, yes, but on their own terms with options in multiple directions, which was entirely different from being trapped in the bottom of a canyon with no exit. He reached for the transceiver. Ghost 1 Alpha team is clear of the channel. Current position is approximately 200 meters southwest of the primary perimeter. We need extraction guidance. Static. He waited. Nothing. Ghost 1, do you copy? Silence. He looked at Martinez. Martinez was already scanning the ridge above them, working his scope across the terrain, looking for a sign of her position. Anything? Ethan asked. Nothing. She's either repositioned or she's... Martinez stopped himself. Keep scanning, Ethan said. Chief? That was Marcus, and his voice had changed. The mission focus was still there, but something had sharpened underneath it, something personal. She's been up there for 14 hours, alone, hurt, running on whatever she had in her pack when everything else went down. If she's not responding. She's responding, Ethan said. He said it with more certainty than he felt. He said it because the alternative was a thought he was not prepared to follow to its conclusion. Not right now, not with Holloway needing a surgeon and the enemy still in the area and the night not over by a significant margin. He said it and he held on to it and he pressed the transceiver again. Ghost 1, this is Walker. We're out. We're moving. I need to know you're there. And then the frequency did something it hadn't done all night. It cleared, not partially, not fragmentarily. It came through clean, and when it did, the voice on the other end was close enough that it felt like she was standing 3 feet away instead of however far up that mountain she was. Still here, Chief. A pause, shorter than the ones before. I knew you'd make it through the channel. He let out a breath that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else he had a name for. What's your position? He asked. Doesn't matter right now. I've got eyes on an extraction viable clearing 400 meters due south of you. There's no enemy presence in it currently. The commander has pulled most of his remaining ground assets back to reorganize. He's lost his ridge element, and he doesn't know what he's dealing with yet. You've got maybe 12 minutes before he figures it out and repositions. Can you call for extraction from your position? A pause. The kind of pause that answered the question before the words did. My equipment is limited, she said carefully. But I've been transmitting on the emergency beacon frequency since 0200. If anyone's listening, they know we're here. Since 0200. Ethan processed that. 0200 was 4 hours ago. She had been transmitting a beacon signal for 4 hours, which meant she had found a way to do it with whatever equipment she had salvaged after the landslide destroyed her primary kit. Which meant she had been maintaining that transmission simultaneously with moving through enemy territory and identifying the drainage channel route, and taking down the North Ridge position and maintaining observation on the South Passage and guiding the team through the channel exit. All of that at the same time alone hurt for 14 hours before any of this and then through all of this. Alpha team is moving to the extraction clearing, he said, keeping his voice steady. I need you to come down. Another pause. This one lasted longer. And when she spoke again, something was different in her voice. Not the control was still there, and it was going to be there until it wasn't, because that was the kind of person she was, and he knew it now with certainty he hadn't had 3 days ago. But underneath the control, there was something she was working to manage that wasn't tactical. Something that was about location and physics and what her body was capable of doing after everything it had already done. The descent on the north face is complicated, she said. Define complicated, he said. A beat. I'll figure it out, she said. Get to the clearing. I'll find you. He wanted to push her on it. He wanted to ask what complicated meant in precise physical terms. He wanted to know exactly what conditions she was in and what she had left and what the descent actually required. All of that was in him pressing against the radio discipline he'd maintained for 15 years. But he also recognized the specific quality of what she was doing. She was not hiding information to protect her ego. She was managing his attention the way a professional manages the attention of the people depending on them, not by lying about the situation, but by sequencing what they need to know based on what is actionable in this moment versus what would only add weight to their load right now. She had been doing that all night, guiding them without burdening them, giving them exactly what they needed when they needed it, and holding back what would only slow them down. Copy that, he said. Ghost one, you get off that mountain. That's not a request. Understood, Chief. The smallest possible pause. Moving now. He pocketed the transceiver and turned to his team. Extraction clearing, 400 meters south, 12 minutes. Let's move. They moved. This stretch was different from the canyon and different from the channel. They were in open ground now, which meant speed was possible, but exposure was real, and the balance between those two things required constant adjustment based on terrain and visibility, and the angle of whatever light the stars were providing. Martina set a pace that was fast without being reckless, the pace of a man who understood that the equation of speed versus concealment had shifted and knew exactly where the new balance point was. Marcus and Holloway were behind him. Marcus was breathing hard now, not from fear, but from the sustained physical work of supporting a man of Holloway's size across uneven terrain for the better part of 10 minutes. Was not complaining. He would not complain. But Ethan could hear it, and he filed it away and kept moving. They were 200 meters from the clearing when the radio came back again. Not Emily. A different voice. Male. Clipped. Military cadence. Unknown station on emergency frequency. This is Rescue Alpha 4, inbound from the north. If you're Alpha Team, please confirm. Ethan grabbed the transceiver so fast he nearly dropped it. Rescue Alpha 4, this is Chief Warrant Officer Ethan Walker, Alpha Team. We are a 4-man element, 1 critical casualty, approximately 200 meters south of current position, moving toward open clearing. Please advise. Walker, we have your beacon. ETA 7 minutes. Can you confirm your position is defensible? Negative. Rescue Alpha 4. We are in open terrain. Enemy still active in the area. Recommend you come in fast and low. Copy that. Coming in a fast and low. Be advised we have 2 armed escort platforms with us. We will suppress as needed. Be in the clearing in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Holloway needed surgery. He had maybe an hour left in his window. 5 minutes to reach the clearing, 7 minutes for the helicopter. 12 minutes total. It was tight enough that Ethan ran the calculation twice. It worked. It barely worked, but it worked. Moving to the clearing now, he confirmed. Alpha Team out. He looked at Marcus. Marcus had heard the transmission. His face had done something that started as relief and immediately got compressed back into focus because they still had ground to cover and a critical patient to move, and nothing was done until it was done. 5 minutes, Ethan told him. Moving, Marcus said. They moved faster. Martinez was already at the edge of the clearing, checking it, running his eyes across every angle with the disciplined urgency of a man who knows that no enemy presence currently and no enemy presence at all are 2 different statements and acts accordingly. Clear, he said. They entered the clearing. Ethan immediately positioned himself on the north side rifle, up scanning back toward the area they had come from. He could hear nothing. No movement, no pursuit. Either the enemy commander was still reorganizing after losing the ridge element, or, and this was a possibility, Ethan didn't dismiss, there was something else happening up on the mountain that was keeping enemy attention occupied in a different direction. He thought about the descent on the north face. I thought about the word complicated. Martinez, he said. Northern Ridge. Tell me what you see. Martinez raised his scope, scanned, took his time, the way you take your time when it matters. I've got movement, he said slowly. North face midway down, single figure moving south, moving fast. He kept the scope on it, watching. Chief, he stopped. What? She's not using the normal descent route. She's coming down a section of the face that looks almost vertical from here. He paused again. She's moving like she's injured, but she's moving. Ethan turned. He looked north. He could not see her. The distance and the darkness made it impossible without Martinez's optic. But he knew she was there because Martinez had eyes on her and Martinez did not say things he wasn't sure of. She was coming down the north face, the section that looked almost vertical. Injured, moving fast anyway. How much time, he asked. At her current pace, 4 minutes, maybe less. The sound of rotors reached them from the north, still distant, still building, but unmistakable. The sound of someone coming to get them, and it was the best sound Ethan Walker had heard in the entire night, and he let himself feel it for exactly 2 seconds before he went back to counting angles. Marcus, he said. Ready by him, Marcus confirmed. He had positioned Holloway in the optimal orientation for a rapid load into a helicopter. Holloway was conscious, barely but conscious. His eyes found Ethan across the clearing. We've got you, Ethan told him. Holloway didn't try to speak. He just nodded once. Slow, deliberate. The nod of a man who is operating on reserves he didn't know he had and is choosing to spend them on the specific, focused work of staying alive until someone else can take over that job. Ethan turned back north. The rotors were louder now, coming in from above the ridgeline following the terrain, the way military pilots follow terrain at night, low and aggressive and enormously competent. Martinez, he said. She's close, Martinez said. He had not lowered the scope. He was tracking her down the face with an attention that was partly tactical and partly something else. The specific quality of attention a soldier gives to watching someone do something extraordinary. Chief, I need to tell you something. Tell me. The section she's coming down. The almost vertical part. He paused. She's doing it one-handed. The clearing went very quiet. Not literally. The rotors were building. The night sounds were still there. But in the space between the 4 of them, something quiet happened. One-handed. Down a near vertical section of a mountain face. After 14 hours alone. After a landslide. After everything she had done up there, that they only partly knew about and would likely never fully know about because she was not the kind of person who cataloged her own actions for others to evaluate. When she gets down here, Marcus said quietly, somebody's going to have to physically stop me from saying something embarrassing. You can say whatever you want, Ethan said, when she gets down here. The first helicopter came over the ridgeline. It came in exactly the way Rescue Alpha 4 had promised, fast and low, with the 2 escort platforms flanking it, armed and scanning the whole formation, moving with the controlled aggression of people who knew they were going into a contested zone and had made their peace with that fact. They were 40 seconds from touchdown when Emily Carter came off the north face and into the clearing. She was walking, not the way someone walks when they are fine. The way someone walks when stopping is not an option they are willing to select. Her left arm was held against her body in a way that made its condition apparent without requiring any other explanation. Her rifle was in her right hand. Her face was a study in the specific expression that forms when a human being has reached the absolute outer limit of what they can physically sustain and has decided to sustain it anyway because the alternative is unacceptable. She walked across this clearing. She reached the team. She looked at Ethan, and she said, I told you I'd be there. He looked at her for a moment. He thought about everything he wanted to say. He thought about the doubt he had carried into the mission briefing 3 days ago. He thought about the assignment he had given her, partly because he wasn't sure she could handle what came next. He thought about 14 hours on a mountain. He thought about one-handed and near vertical and still here. He said, you did. Martinez made a sound he would later deny making. Marcus was already at her side, his medic hands moving over her left arm with the efficient, gentle assessment of someone who has been trained to find the truth of a wound, regardless of what the person carrying it says about it. Radius is cracked, he said quietly after 3 seconds. You've been running this op with a cracked radius. I know, she said. For how long? She considered. Since about 0300 yesterday. Marcus closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them. Okay, he said. Let's get you on that helicopter. The lead helicopter touched down in the clearing at the exact moment Rescue Alpha 4 had promised. 7 minutes from contact, right on time. The crew was out and moving before the rotors had reached their static pitch, and the practiced, urgent coordination of a military rescue extraction filled the clearing with organized, purposeful noise. Holloway went on first, fast, careful. The crew chief's assessment of his condition was instant and professional, and the IV line was in before they had him fully secured. Marcus followed him up because Marcus went where his patient went, and that was not a discussion. Ethan held the side of the aircraft and turned back toward Emily, who was moving toward him with her right hand still on her rifle and her left arm held tight, and her expression carrying the particular quality of someone who is very close to the end of what they have, but is not going to show it to anyone until they are somewhere they can afford to. He put his hand out. She took it. He pulled her in. She sat down heavily against the aircraft wall and closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, the kind of closing that was not sleep or weakness, but the momentary necessary act of letting something go that you have been holding by force for a very long time. Then she opened them again. Martinez was the last one in. The door closed. The helicopter lifted. Ethan sat across from Emily Carter in the climbing aircraft and looked at her. She was looking at Holloway, watching Marcus work, watching the crew chief run the IV, watching the organized, competent work of people doing exactly what they were trained to do. Her expression was the expression of someone who has spent a very long time operating alone and is still processing on some animal level what it feels like to be surrounded by people who are on the same side. I thought about the operations center 3 days ago. He thought about 19 confirmed. He thought about when everything fails, you won't need to believe in me. You'll only need to know I'm there. He had not believed her when she said it. He had been wrong about that in a way that was going to take him a long time to fully reckon with. But he was starting. The helicopter banked north and accelerated, and the mountains fell away below them, and the night that had tried to consume every one of them was left behind in the dark where it belonged. The helicopter had been in the air for 4 minutes when James Holloway flatlined. Not the slow warning kind of decline that gives you time to prepare. The sudden kind. The kind that happens when a body has been managing catastrophic internal damage through sheer force of will, and the moment it gets somewhere safe enough to stop fighting, it stops fighting entirely. The monitor attached to his chest by the crew chief let out a single continuous tone, and Marcus Reed went from sitting to moving in less time than it takes to describe it, his hands already in position, his voice already calling out to the crew chief for equipment he needed right now. He's in V-fib, Marcus said, not shouting. The controlled high-velocity voice of a man running a resuscitation with everything he has. I need the AED, now. The crew chief had it off the wall before Marcus finished the sentence. Emily opened her eyes. Across the aircraft, she watched Marcus work. She watched his hands. She watched the speed and the precision and the specific quality of controlled desperation that looks like calm to anyone who doesn't know what they're seeing, but is nothing like calm at all. She had her right hand pressed flat against the aircraft floor. She was using it as a grounding point, something physical to hold on to, while her body tried to figure out what to do now that it was no longer required to perform at the level she had demanded of it for the past 16 hours. Her left arm was immobilized against her chest, and every movement of the helicopter translated into a specific, sharp communication from the cracked radius that she had been managing through a combination of compression technique, adjustment, and the particular mental override that combat teaches you the ability to acknowledge pain as information without letting it become instruction. She acknowledged it now. She did not let it become instruction. Come on, James, she said quietly. Not loud enough for anyone to hear over the rotors and the monitor and Marcus calling out another cycle. Just said it. For herself, for him, for the 5-year-old daughter she had seen in the photograph on his file page during the mission briefing 3 days ago, riding bicycles in a driveway in San Diego. The AED delivered its charge. The monitor tone changed. Marcus watched the readout for 3 seconds that lasted considerably longer than 3 seconds. Then he exhaled. Sinus rhythm, he said. He's back. The crew chief made a sound that was professional relief. The sound of someone who has seen this go both ways enough times to never take either outcome for granted. He adjusted the IV rate and started a second line, and did it all in the compressed, efficient manner of someone who understood that back was not the same as safe and that the work was not finished. Ethan, who had been sitting completely still on the opposite side of the aircraft with his rifle across his knees and his eyes on Holloway, from the moment the monitor alarmed, lowered his head for 1 second, just one, then back up, eyes clear, expression composed. The practiced composure of a senior operator who cannot afford to let his team see him break even in relief, because the moment he breaks is the moment they think it's over, and it was not over. Not yet. Martinez, who had no such constraint, pressed both hands over his face and left them there for 5 full seconds. Emily watched all of it. She watched the way each man handled the same 30 seconds of crisis differently, and she understood something about each of them in that moment that she had not fully understood before. Not from their files, not from the briefing, from this, from watching them at the outer edge of what they could endure and seeing what they were made of when the edge got reached. Ethan caught her eye. I didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. But something passed between them in that look that was the beginning of a different kind of understanding, not the professional acknowledgement of competence, which had been established on the mountain, something more personal. The recognition between two people who have survived something together that cannot be fully explained to anyone who wasn't there. The helicopter banked hard to the east. 14 minutes to Riverside, the pilot called back. Medical team is standing by. 14 minutes, Emily closed her eyes again. She let herself go back very briefly to the moment it had started. Not the mission, not the briefing. The moment on the mountain 48 hours ago, when she had understood that the easy version of this situation was gone, and everything from this point forward was going to cost something real. She had been at the observation post. She had established her position, set up her optic, and was running the preliminary target assessment that her role required when the explosion came. She had felt it before she heard it, the pressure wave moving through the rock, the specific physical communication of a large detonation at close range. She had turned in time to see the upper section of the approach route disappear into a cascade of rock and debris that sealed the valley behind the SEAL team like a door closing. Her radio went immediately after that. The same jamming that had taken out the team's satellite uplink had apparently extended to her position as well, and when she keyed her primary handset and got nothing and keyed her backup and got the same nothing, she had sat with that for approximately 15 seconds. 15 seconds of sitting with it. Then she had started working. She had made one initial assessment and one initial decision. The assessment was that the SEAL team was now in a contained position with degraded communications, which meant they were being set up for elimination. The decision was that her role was no longer observation and that she was not going to the rear. She was going forward. The shoulder had been a problem from the moment she started moving. She had caught it on the rock face during an early traverse. Not a fall, a controlled descent that went slightly wrong when a handhold gave way, resulting in a contact with the wall that did the specific damage she had been managing ever since. She had assessed it, established that it was cracked rather than fully broken, based on range of motion and pain pattern, improvised immobilization using what she had in her pack, and continued, because there was no version of what she was doing that allowed her to stop. She had spent the next 14 hours building a complete picture of the enemy disposition from the high ground they hadn't thought to secure because they hadn't thought anyone was there. She had identified patrol patterns, weapons positions, communication nodes, and the drainage channel that she had filed away as a potential extraction route for exactly this scenario. The scenario where the primary exit was blocked and the team needed an alternative that the enemy hadn't mapped. She had been preparing for the moment she knew was coming. She had just not known when. And then Ethan's voice had come through the damaged emergency frequency, thin and static broken, but unmistakably his, and she had known the moment had arrived. The rest of it was work. Hard, precise, painful work done from a position the enemy had been certain was unreachable against targets who had never considered the possibility that the highest point of the ridge was occupied. The tactical advantage of complete surprise at that range, with her capability level, had been decisive in a way that nothing else about the night had been. She had not been proving anything. She had been doing her job. The distinction mattered to her in a way that was difficult to articulate and that she had stopped trying to articulate to most people because they tended to hear it as false modesty when it was actually the opposite of modesty. It was precision. She knew what she was and she knew what she could do, and she had never needed anyone else to confirm either of those things. The confirmation was always in the outcome. Carter, she opened her eyes. Ethan was leaning forward slightly, his elbows on his knees, looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not the professional assessment face he had worn during the briefing, not the command face he had worn in the canyon, something more direct than either of those, something that required a different kind of courage to show than anything that had happened on the mountain. "Yeah," she said, "I need to say something." "You don't have to," she said. "I know I don't have to." He held her gaze. "I assigned you to that observation post partly because I wasn't sure you could handle the close contact phase. I told myself it was tactical logic." He paused. "It wasn't only that." She looked at him. She had known this. She had known it from the moment the assignment came through, and she had made her own assessment of it and decided that the way you answered that kind of doubt was not with words, and had gone to the observation post and done exactly what she was trained to do with exactly the capabilities she had always had. "Okay," she said. "That's it. Okay. What do you want me to say, Chief? That you were wrong? You were wrong. You know you were wrong. I don't need to confirm it." He almost smiled. It was not quite a smile, but it was in the neighborhood. "Fair enough," he said. Martinez from the far end of the aircraft chose this moment to speak. He had been quiet since Marcus called the sinus rhythm processing, in the way that young men process things, not out loud, but visibly the work of it showing in his face. "Captain Carter," he said. She looked at him. "I said some things before the mission in the ready room." He stopped, started again. "About whether you were there because of Martinez," she said. "I need to say it." "You don't." "I do because Danny." She used his first name and it stopped him. "I heard what you said. I've been hearing versions of it for 6 years. And every single time I made the same decision. I decided the best answer was the mission." She looked at him steadily. "Tonight was the mission. So we're done." Martinez stared at her for a moment. Then he nodded. It was the nod of someone who has just had something heavy taken off them by the person they least deserve to have take it, and who is going to spend a long time making sure they deserve it eventually. The helicopter crossed a ridgeline, and the lights of the valley below became visible through the forward windows. Civilization with its hospitals and its surgeons and its safe-lighted places where the decisions were different and the costs were lower. Marcus, without looking up from Holloway, said, "He's stable. BP is coming up. He's going to make it." The aircraft went quiet in a specific way. The quiet of people who have been holding something very tightly and are only now very carefully beginning to let go of it. Emily looked at her left arm. She thought about the descent on the north face. She thought about the specific moment she could locate it exactly halfway down in the section that Martinez had described as near vertical, when she had understood that her left arm was not going to be able to support her weight on that particular section of rock. She had understood this clearly and practically the way you understand a tactical problem, and she had shifted her entire technique in real time, rerouting her descent path 6 feet to the east, where a crack system allowed a different kind of movement, and she had come down the rest of the face using her feet and her right hand, and the specific trained understanding of how to move on vertical terrain that she had built over years, and that she had never once expected anyone to know she had or to need her to have. Nobody was watching her do that. Nobody was watching her do any of it. That had never been the point. The point was the 3 men in the canyon and the man flatlined in the helicopter, and the drainage channel and the patrol timing and the 12 seconds on the North Ridge, and being somewhere that mattered when it mattered. That was always the point. Ethan had been watching her while she processed all of this. He had the specific quality of attention of a man who has recently revised a significant assumption and is still working out what else needs revising. "One question," he said. "Go ahead." "The drainage channel. How long had you been tracking that patrol pattern before we called for guidance?" 14 hours, she said. He was quiet for a moment. "You knew we were going to need it." "I knew you were going to need something. I didn't know what. So I mapped everything I could find." She shifted slightly, adjusting her arm's position against her body. "You were going to make it out one way or another. I just wanted to make sure the options were there when you needed them. He stopped. What? That's exactly what a good teammate does. She met his eyes. Yes, she said, it is. The words landed without ceremony. That was how she needed them to land, not as a statement about gender or about proof or about the 6 years of having to do everything twice as well to be taken half as seriously. Just as a fact about the work stated between two professionals who had been in the same fight and come out the other side, which was the only credential that had ever actually mattered. The helicopter began its descent. Below them, the landing pad at Riverside Medical Center was lit up and the medical team was in position. The organized rapid response configuration of people ready to do their part of a job that other people had started somewhere in the dark. We're 60 seconds out, the pilot called. Marcus was in final preparation mode, speaking quietly to the crew chief, handing off Holloway's status information in the compressed, precise language of medical personnel who understand that transitions between care providers are where people get lost if the handoff isn't clean. He arrested once in flight, Marcus said. 12 minutes ago, AED, one shock sinus rhythm restored, BP is stabilizing, internal bleeding subrib shrapnel left side. He's going to need imaging before surgery. He paused. Tell them he held on. Tell them it matters. The crew chief looked at him. I'll tell them, he said. The aircraft touched down. The medical team moved. Holloway was off the aircraft and moving toward the surgical entrance. Within 90 seconds of touchdown, Marcus walking alongside the gurney and still talking because the handoff was not complete until he said it was. And he was not the kind of medic who let his patient disappear into a building without making absolutely certain every person now responsible for that patient had everything they needed to make the right decisions. Ethan stepped off the aircraft onto the landing pad and stood still for a moment. He put both hands flat on the side of the helicopter and stood there with his weight on his arms and his head down, and he did something he did not often do in front of anyone. He took a moment, just one. The weight of the night settling briefly into something manageable. Not gone, it was never gone. But manageable, the specific necessary transition from operational to human that every person who does this work has to make, and that gets harder every time you have to make it from a longer distance. Martinez came to stand next to him. They didn't say anything for a few seconds. Chief, Martinez finally said. Yeah. I keep thinking about the 12 seconds. Ethan looked at him. On the ridge, Martinez said, 12 seconds and it was over. I counted. He was quiet for a moment. I've been in this unit for 3 years. I've seen some things, but I've never seen anything like that. Ethan straightened up. Neither have I. They both turned. Emily Carter was still on the helicopter. The crew chief was doing a preliminary stabilization of her arm, working carefully, his movements efficient and respectful of the fact that she was managing what she was managing. She was sitting upright, watching the entrance where Holloway had disappeared with the expression of someone waiting to confirm a thing they need to confirm before they can close a file. She's waiting to hear he's in surgery, Martinez said. Yeah, Ethan said. She's not going to let them work on her arm until she knows. No, Ethan agreed. She's not. He walked back to the helicopter. He climbed back in and sat down across from her. She looked at him. You don't have to wait with me. I know. She didn't push it. They sat in the stationary helicopter on the landing pad while the rotors spun down around them and they waited. 2 minutes. 3. The crew chief finished his preliminary work on her arm and moved to other post-flight tasks and gave them the space that competent people give to a situation they understand without needing it explained. Then Marcus appeared at the aircraft door. He was still in his field gear. He was covered in the evidence of everything the night had required of him. He looked at both of them. He's in surgery, he said. Surgeon says if we'd been 20 minutes later. He stopped, reconsidered, started again. She said it was close. She said whoever kept him going got it right. He looked at Emily when he said the last part. Not performing it, just saying it, directly. The way Marcus Reed said everything, without ornamentation, without excess, because the word itself was enough. Emily nodded once. She put her right hand on the floor of the aircraft. She started to stand up. Ethan was there immediately offering his arm, without making it into anything the way you offer support to someone who has earned the right to take it without being diminished by the taking. She took it. She stood. She stepped off the helicopter onto the landing pad, her feet on solid ground, both of them. The night air was different down here than it had been on the mountain. Warmer, softer, without the specific edge that high-altitude darkness has. She breathed it in, and she let the temperature and the stillness and the fact of being at the bottom of something instead of the top of it register in her body. Martinez was standing a few feet away. He looked at her and started to say something. She held up her right hand, not to silence him, to pause him. Later, she said. He nodded. She turned to Ethan. I need to go find a doctor, she said. Yeah, he said, you do. The arm's going to need a cast, probably 6 weeks. I'm going to miss the debrief. You're not going to miss anything, he said. I'll make sure of it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she did something she had not done at any point during the mission. Not in the operations center 3 days ago, not on the mountain, not in the helicopter, not on the landing pad. She smiled. It was not a large smile. It was not a triumphant smile. It was the smile of someone who has done a hard thing in a hard place and come out the other side and is now standing on flat ground in the dark with a cracked arm and a team that is alive and a patient in surgery and a long road of paperwork and debrief and medical appointments and probably more arguments about whether she belongs in rooms she has more right to be in than most of the people questioning her presence. All of that was coming. She knew it, and she smiled anyway, because tonight it didn't matter. Tonight she had been exactly where she needed to be, and everyone who needed to come home had come home. She walked across the landing pad toward the medical entrance. Ethan watched her go. Martinez came to stand next to him again. You know what the hardest part of tonight was, Martinez said. Tell me. Realizing that she never doubted it. Not once, he paused. I was scared the whole time, every minute, and she was up there alone and hurt, and somehow she was the calmest person in the whole operation. Ethan thought about the 14 hours on the mountain. He thought about the drainage channel and the patrol timing and the 12 seconds on the North Ridge and the near vertical descent with one hand. He thought about calm. She wasn't calm because she wasn't scared, he said. She was calm because she decided the fear wasn't the most important thing. Martinez chewed on that. You think she knew we were going to make it, he asked. Ethan watched the medical entrance where Emily Carter had just disappeared. I think she made sure of it, he said. James Holloway came out of surgery at 03:47 hours. The surgeon who walked into the waiting area was a woman named Dr. Patricia Hale, 51 years old, 23 years of trauma surgery experience, and she had the specific economy of movement that belongs to people who have been delivering news in hospital corridors long enough to know that the way you walk toward a family tells them almost everything before you open your mouth. She walked toward Ethan and Marcus and Martinez with her shoulders level and her pace unhurried. And all three of them read it correctly before she said a single word. He's out, she said. He's stable. The shrapnel was positioned in a way that should have been a great deal worse than it was. Whoever managed his care in the field did something right. She looked at Marcus. That you and them? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. She nodded once, the nod of a surgeon acknowledging a colleague. He's going to need 6 to 8 weeks of recovery. He'll walk out of here. He'll go home. She paused. You got him here in time. In another 20 minutes and we'd be having a different conversation. Marcus put his hand over his mouth. He stood like that for 3 seconds. Then he lowered it and said, "Thank you, doctor." She left them in the corridor. Martinez sat down in one of the plastic chairs along the wall and put his elbows on his knees and stared at the floor. Not falling apart, processing. The slow, necessary work of a young man absorbing the full shape of a night that had required more of him than he had known he had to give, and discovering that he had given it anyway, and not quite knowing yet what to do with that discovery. Ethan stood with his back against the wall. The corridor was quiet, a few nurses moving at the far end, the ambient sound of a hospital at nearly 4 a.m, which was a specific kind of quiet that was not actually quiet at all, full of monitors and ventilators, and the soft, constant communication of machinery keeping people alive. He thought about Karen Holloway in San Diego. He thought about 2 5-year-old girls on bicycles in a driveway. I thought about the phone call that someone was going to make in the next hour, the call that was going to start with your husband is out of surgery and your husband is going to come home. And he thought about what that call was going to mean to the person receiving it. He thought about Emily Carter in the treatment room down the hall. She had walked in there 40 minutes ago on her own 2 feet, and the last thing she had said to him before the door closed was "I'll be fine," which he believed because disbelieving it was not a productive use of his attention, and also because in the last 16 hours she had proven herself capable of operating at a level that redefined his understanding of what fine meant in practice. But he was going to check on her in a few minutes. First, he needed to do something he had been putting off. He pulled out his personal phone and dialed a number he had memorized years ago. It rang twice. Walker. The voice on the other end was his commanding officer, Colonel David Reyes, and it carried the tone of a man who had been awake for a while and was expecting this call. "Tell me." "All four accounted for, sir. Holloway is out of surgery stable. Prognosis is good. The rest of us are at Riverside." A silence on the line. Not the silence of a man processing unexpected information. The silence of a man releasing something he had been holding very tightly. "Good," Reyes said. "That's good, Walker." "Yes, sir." "The operation objective was not reached. The mission area was compromised before we could complete the assessment. However, sir, we have significant intelligence on the network's operational structure based on 14 hours of direct observation by Captain Carter." Another silence, this one different. "Carter," Reyes said. "Yes, sir." "She made it out." It was not quite a question. It was the statement of a man who had been carrying a specific weight since the moment the landslide was reported and who was now carefully setting it down. "She did more than make it out, sir," Ethan said. "She held the observation post through the separation event, maintained surveillance on enemy positions for 14 hours under compromised conditions, provided the extraction route that got the team out of the perimeter, and neutralized the Northridge threat that was preparing the final assault on our position." Reyes was quiet for a moment. "Alone," he said. "Alone, sir. With a cracked radius, she sustained approximately 3 hours into the separation and did not disclose until we were on the helicopter." Another silence. "She didn't disclose it," Reyes repeated. "No, sir. Because she thought you'd pull her if you knew." Ethan considered that. "I think she didn't disclose it because she didn't consider it relevant to the mission." "Sir." He heard something on the other end of the line that might have been a quiet exhale or might have been the beginning of a response that Reyes thought better of. "Then I want a full debrief at 1400 hours. All team members who are cleared to travel. Carter may still be in treatment at Form 400. Then we debrief without Carter and we debrief with Carter separately. However it needs to work. But Walker," Reyes stopped. "Sir, make sure she's in the room when it matters. Whatever we do with this report, I want her in the room." "Understood, sir." He ended the call. Martinez had looked up while he was talking. He had caught enough of the conversation to fill in the rest, and what his face was doing was the slow revision of a person who had held a specific belief long enough to have built things on top of it, and was now finding that the foundation was wrong and that the building needed to come down. "I wants her in the room," Martinez said. "He wants her in the room," Ethan confirmed, "because of what she did, because of what she's always been. Tonight just made it visible to the people who needed to see it." Martinez looked at the floor again. "I almost got her removed from the mission before it launched," he said. "Did you know that?" Ethan looked at him. "What?" "2 nights before, I went to Holloway." He said it flatly, not hiding from it, not making it easier than it was. "I told him I thought she was going to be a liability, that she hadn't operated with the unit, that the mission was too high risk to have an unknown quantity in the observation position." Ethan kept his expression neutral. He was aware that Martinez was not confessing because he wanted absolution. He was confessing because he had decided that the truth of what he had done was going to sit in his chest and corrode something important if he didn't say it out loud to someone, and right now Ethan was the only option. "What did Holloway say?" Ethan asked. Martinez was quiet for a moment. "He said I was probably right," Martinez said. "He said he'd look into it." The corridor was very quiet. "And then," Ethan said, "and then Holloway went out on the mission and took a piece of shrapnel and spent 4 hours in surgery and came out the other side because she was on the mountain." Martinez looked up. "Because she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do. Even though 2 people who were supposed to know better spent the week before the mission trying to find reasons to remove her from it." Ethan said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say that Martinez hadn't already said to himself. "I need to tell her," Martinez said. "You told her some of it on the helicopter." "Not all of it, not the part about going to Holloway." He stood up from the chair. She deserves to know the whole thing. Martinez. Ethan waited until he had full attention. The reason you're going to tell her isn't because it'll make you feel better. She's not responsible for making you feel better. I know. So why are you going to tell her Martinez thought about it, really thought about it, not reaching for the easy answer? Because she should know that the system that was supposed to assess her clearly didn't, and she should know that I know that, and that I'm going to spend the next however long making sure I see people more clearly than I saw her. He paused. She might not care, she probably doesn't need it, but I'm going to say it because it's true and because things that are true should get said. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Then say it, he said, but say it like what it is. Not an apology looking for a receipt, just the truth. Yeah, Martinez said, just the truth. He walked down the corridor toward the treatment rooms. Ethan stayed where he was for another minute. I thought about all of it. He thought about the way the unit had responded to Emily Carter's arrival 3 days ago, and the way he had responded and the specific, quiet complicity of a man in a position of authority who sees a bias operating in his unit and doesn't confront it directly because confronting it directly feels like disruption and the mission is already complicated. And there will be time for the cultural work later. There is always time for the cultural work later. Except sometimes later doesn't come. Sometimes the cost of later shows up on a mountain in northern Arizona at 0, 200 in the form of one person alone, in the dark with a cracked arm and a rifle, and 14 hours of accumulated work that nobody knew existed. He pushed off from the wall. He walked down the corridor. He found the treatment room and knocked twice. Come in, said Emily. He opened the door. She was sitting on the treatment table with her left arm in a fresh cast, still partial set, the kind of pale blue that looked medical and temporary. She had been cleaned up, and her hair was different than it had been on the mountain, lower arranged differently. The automatic adjustment of someone who has just had medical personnel working around their head. She looked objectively like someone who had been through something significant and was now in the process of convincing her body that the significant thing was over. She also looked, Ethan noted, more tired than he had seen her look at any point during the actual operation, which was exactly right. She had been running on something other than normal energy for the past 16 hours, and now that the operation was finished and Holloway was in recovery and the team was out, whatever had been keeping that going was stepping back and letting the real accounting happen. Martinez was standing in the corner of the room. He looked at Ethan briefly when he came in, a look that said he had said what he came to say. Ethan read Emily's expression for confirmation, and what he found, there was not the irritation or the dismissal he might have expected. What he found was something quieter, tired and direct, and already moving past it the way she moved past everything that was not immediately useful. You heard, Martinez said to Ethan. Enough. He looked at Emily. How's the arm? 6 weeks, she said. Cast comes off in 3, then they reassess. I'll be cleared for light duty before the debrief cycle is done. You're not cleared for anything for at least 72 hours. I'm aware. I'm telling you anyway. She almost smiled. Okay. He sat down in the chair next to the treatment table. She looked at him and waited. She had learned in the time since the helicopter that Ethan Walker did not come into a room without a reason. He was not the kind of man who visited without purpose. Every interaction he initiated had something underneath it, and she had learned to wait for the underneath thing rather than filling the silence with noise. I'm recommending you for a commendation, he said. She started to say something. He held up one hand, not dismissive. Just hold that. I know you don't want it, he said. I know that's not why you did what you did. I know the last thing you need is a ceremony and a certificate and a reason for the people who already have issues with your presence to say she got that because of politics. He paused. I'm recommending you anyway, because the record needs to say what happened on that mountain. Not for you, for the record. For the next person who comes after you and needs the system to have already dealt with this. Emily was quiet. She looked at the cast on her arm. She turned it slightly, testing the weight of it in her new range of motion. Getting familiar with the constraint, the way you get familiar with any new condition. Not resisting it, just learning its edges. 19 didn't cover it, she said. 19 covered it for anyone who looked at the file, he said. Tonight is what covers it for the people who don't read files. She looked at him. Something moved through her expression that was too complex to name with a single word. It was not vanity, and it was not hunger for recognition, and it was not relief exactly. It was something in the neighborhood of the feeling you get when a thing you have known about yourself for years finally becomes visible to someone else on their own without you having to make them see it. The specific private satisfaction of that moment, which is different from pride and different from vindication, and is, if anything, quieter than either. Okay, she said. Okay, she repeated. Put it in the record. He nodded. Then, because the moment allowed it, and because Ethan Walker was not at his core, a person who withheld things that needed to be said, he said the rest of it. I've been doing this for 15 years, he said. I've seen a lot of people in the field. I've seen men I was certain were going to be great turn out to be ordinary under pressure. And I've seen people I wasn't sure about turn out to be exactly what the situation needed. He paused. What you did on that mountain is the most complete individual performance I've ever seen in a field operation. I want you to know I said that, not in a debrief, not in a report, right now to your face. The treatment room was very quiet. Martinez in the corner was looking at the floor the way a person looks at the floor when they are in the presence of something that doesn't belong to them and they want to honor that by not inserting themselves into it. Emily looked at Ethan for a long moment. Thank you, she said, not deflecting it, not redirecting it, just receiving it cleanly the way she received everything directly without excess. Don't thank me, he said. I should have seen it 3 days ago. You saw it when you needed to, she said. That's what counts. He shook his head. That's a generous read. Maybe, but it's the one I'm choosing. She shifted on the table, adjusting her position carefully around the cast. Because the alternative is spending energy on what should have been different, and I've never found that particularly useful. He looked at her. How do you do that? He asked. Do what? Let it go like that, all of it. The assumptions, the doubts, the weak of your own teammates trying to find reasons to remove you from the mission. How do you carry all of that and still operate the way you operated tonight? She thought about it. Not for long. She had thought about this before clearly, and what came out was not rehearsed, but it was settled the answer of someone who has worked through a thing until they understand it at a level below words and is now translating it back up. Because if I carry it, she said, it changes the weight distribution, and on a mountain weight distribution matters. Martinez made a sound in the corner that was not quite a laugh, not inappropriate, just the involuntary response of someone who has just heard something land with more precision than they were prepared for. Ethan nodded slowly. Weight distribution, he repeated. Everything you're angry about, everything you're carrying that isn't the mission, it shows up in your hands, in your decisions, in the half-second delay between seeing the shot and taking it. She looked at him steadily. I couldn't afford that, not up there, not with your team in that canyon. So you just put it down. I put it down when it's operational time. I pick it back up when I have space to deal with it properly. She paused. Tonight is the first time I've had space in 3 days. He let that sit for a moment. I was thinking about the version of himself that had stood at the back of the operations center 3 days ago and watched her handle Holloway's challenge with that exact same quality of precision and had told himself it was performance, that the calm was surface and the substance was unproven. He had been wrong about the nature of what he was seeing. He had not been wrong to want proof. But the proof had cost her a cracked radius and 16 hours alone on a mountain, in a drainage channel mapped by observation over 14 hours of solitary work, and at some point the cost of requiring proof from someone has to be weighed against what requiring that proof does to the person being asked to provide it over and over in a situation after situation for 6 years. When you go back to the unit, he said carefully, things will be different. She looked at him. They'll be different because of what happened tonight, he said. I'll make sure of it. But beyond that, the structure of how you get assigned, the level of autonomy you're given, the way the room responds when you walk in. I can't fix everything, but what I can affect, I will. She was quiet for a moment. I appreciate that, she said. But can I tell you something? Tell me. The thing I needed most wasn't the room to change. It was the mission. She held his gaze. Give me the mission. Give me the real one, not the modified version, not the separated assignment, not the role that keeps me away from the part where things get complicated. Give me the mission and I'll handle the room on my own. He heard it. He heard it in the specific way that you hear a thing that requires you to adjust something fundamental in how you have been operating. Deal, he said. She nodded once. The cast on her arm had set enough that it was solid now. She tested the edge of it with her right hand, pressing lightly along the surface, learning the shape of the next 6 weeks. There was something almost methodical about the gesture, the same quality of focused assessment she had applied to everything else, from the patrol timing to the drainage channel to the near vertical descent. Everything was a problem with a manageable solution if you looked at it clearly enough and without the weight of things that didn't belong in the assessment. "Martinez," she said without looking at the corner. "Yeah," he said. "Go get some sleep." A pause. "Yeah, okay." He straightened up. He looked at Ethan briefly, then back at her. "Captain." She looked at him. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm glad you were there." She held his gaze. "I know," she said. He left. The door closed. Ethan and Emily sat in the treatment room in the quiet of 0420 hours, with Holloway in recovery down the hall, and Marcus somewhere getting coffee, and Martinez somewhere processing the full weight of his own education, and the cast drying on her arm, and the mountain behind all of them in the dark where it belonged. "Get some sleep," Ethan said. "Colonel wants a debrief at 1400. I'll push it if you're not cleared." "I'll be cleared," she said. "Emily." She looked at him. The use of her first name was notable. He had not used it before tonight. Not once. "Sleep," he said. "That's the mission right now." She looked at him for a moment. Then she did something he had not seen her do in any of the hours since the helicopter. She let herself look tired. Not performed, not strategic, just tired. The real kind. The kind that comes after you have held something together for longer than the human body was designed to hold things together, and you are finally in a place where the holding can stop. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Okay." He stood up. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "Carter," he said. "Chief, you kept your promise." She was quiet for a moment. He didn't turn around to see her expression. He didn't need to. "I told you I'd be there," she said. He walked out into the corridor. The door closed softly behind him. And in the treatment room, Emily Carter lay back on the table and looked at the ceiling and breathed for the first time in 16 hours without any weight on top of the breathing. Just air. Just the ceiling. Just the simple, enormous fact of everyone still being alive. The debrief started at 1400 hours exactly. Colonel David Reyes ran a tight room. Always had. 28 years in special operations had given him the specific quality of stillness that belongs to men who have sat in more rooms like this one than they can count, and have learned that the truth of a mission comes out fastest when nobody is performing for the audience. He sat at the head of the table with a legal pad in front of him and a coffee cup he hadn't touched, and he looked at the people who had come through the door, and he read them the way he always read them. Not their words, not yet, but their bodies, their positions relative to each other, the specific texture of the silence they brought in with them. Ethan Walker sat to his right. Clean uniform, straight posture. The expression of a man who had slept 4 hours and processed considerably more than that in the time since the helicopter landed, and who had arrived at this table with something resolved in him that had not been resolved when he left for the mission 3 days ago. Marcus Reed sat next to Ethan. He had the particular quality of a medic the morning after a hard night, not depleted exactly but recalibrated, as if every system in his body had been reset to a baseline that was slightly different from the one it had been running on before. Danny Martinez sat across from them. He looked younger than Reyes remembered him looking at the last debrief. That was not unusual. People who had been through significant events often looked either older or younger afterward, depending on what the event had taken from them and what it had given them in return. Martinez looked younger in the specific way of someone who had shed something they had been carrying that they didn't need and didn't yet know what they were going to carry instead. Emily Carter came in last. She came in at 1402, 2 minutes after the hour, and Reyes watched the room adjust to her presence the way a room adjusts when someone enters who carries a specific weight of recent history. She was in a clean uniform with her left arm in the pant and her hair back, and her posture exactly what it had been when she had walked into this unit 3 days ago, upright, unhurried, carrying nothing extra and nothing false. She took the chair at the far end of the table across from Reyes, and she put her right hand flat on the table surface, and she looked at him directly. "Captain Carter," Reyes said. "Colonel," she said. He held her gaze for a moment, not challenging, assessing. The assessment of a man who had received a phone call at row 34 or 5 that had required him to sit quietly in his office for several minutes after ending it, thinking about what the call told him about a decision he had made 6 months ago to attach Emily Carter to this unit in the first place, and whether that decision had been brave or lucky or simply correct in a way he hadn't fully understood when he made it. He had decided it was correct. He had also decided that correct was not sufficient. Correct was the beginning of an accounting, not the end of one. Let's start from the beginning, he said, Chief Walker, from the moment the mission compromised. Ethan started talking. I was precise and sequential, and he did not editorialize except where the editorial was operationally relevant, which was exactly the right way to run an oral debrief. He covered the satellite uplink failure, the ambush Holloway's injury, the ammunition assessment, the attempted communications restoration, and the first signs of enemy repositioning on the North Ridge. He covered all of it in the flat, measured voice of someone reporting facts, and Reyes wrote notes and asked 3 clarifying questions and let him continue. Then Ethan got to the part about the ridge. He described the sequence of shots, the 12 seconds, the emergency frequency transmission, the voice that came through it. He said, at that point, sir, I assessed that Captain Carter had survived the separation event, maintained her position, and was actively engaging the threat on the North Ridge from an angle the enemy had not anticipated and had not to that point identified. Reyes looked up from his legal pad. He looked at Emily. She met his eyes without expression. Waiting. She was very good at waiting. How did you get to the North Ridge position, Captain? He asked. Alternative route, sir. The primary approach was buried in the landslide. I identified a secondary traverse on the eastern face of the ridge during the initial mission planning and had it in mind as a contingency. You had it in mind during planning? Yes, sir. You identified it before the mission launched? Yes, sir. Reyes set his pen down. He looked at her with the expression of a man doing several calculations simultaneously. When did you identify the drainage channel? Approximately 4 hours into the observation period, sir. I had eyes on the patrol pattern from the high position and mapped the channel as a potential extraction route when I assessed that the primary exit was going to remain blocked. 4 hours in, Reyes repeated. Yes, sir. So you identified the primary failure modes of the mission, the North Ridge threat, and the blocked ground exit, and prepared contingency solutions for both independently over the course of 14 hours while managing a cracked radius and without communications. Emily was quiet for a moment. I did the job I was assigned, sir, she said. The room was very still. Reyes picked his pen back up. He wrote something on his legal pad. He wrote it slowly and deliberately, which was not his usual pace, and the people in the room could read the deliberateness of it as the physical expression of something being made permanent. Continue, Chief Walker, he said. Ethan continued. He covered the drainage channel movement in the patrol timing window, in the near vertical descent, in the landing pad, in the hospital, and the surgery. He covered it all factually and in sequence, and when he was finished, the room was quiet, in the way that rooms get quiet when a complete picture has been presented and everyone in it is now sitting with the full weight of what they've just heard. Reyes closed his legal pad. He looked around the table. I'm going to say something, he said, and I want every person in this room to hear it clearly. He paused, not for effect, because he was choosing his words with care. The after-action report on this mission is going to reflect a complete and accurate account of everything that occurred in those mountains. Not a summary, not a highlights version. Full account. He looked at Ethan. That report is going to be used in training curriculum for this unit going forward, and it is going to be cited by name. Ethan nodded. Reyes turned to Emily. Captain Carter, the commendation that Chief Walker submitted last night has been approved and processed at my level. It will go up the chain as a formal recommendation this afternoon. I want you to know that I reviewed every word of it before approving it, and I added to it. He held her gaze. What I added was this: Captain Carter's performance during this operation represents the highest expression of the values this unit is supposed to embody, not the values we sometimes embody, not the values we aim for, the ones we're supposed to actually live. Emily did not look away. She also did not look like someone receiving recognition. She looked like someone receiving a statement of fact, which was exactly how she received everything. And Reyes found himself thinking that this quality, this specific level refusal to be anything other than what she was in the presence of anything other than what it was possibly the most valuable thing in the room. Thank you, sir, she said. Don't thank me, he said. I'm correcting a record. That's not generosity. That's obligation. Something moved through her expression. Brief, but then it was gone, and she was back to the clear level presence that had been carrying her through this room and every room before it. Martinez made a small sound. Reyes looked at him. Something to add, Corporal. Martinez straightened. No, sir. He stopped. Tried again. I wanted to say for the record that I came into this mission with incorrect assumptions about Captain Carter's capabilities and that those assumptions were wrong. I want that on record too. Reyes held his gaze. That kind of statement takes something. Yes, sir. It's noted. He paused. The fact that you are capable of making it is also noted. Martinez nodded and looked at the table. The debrief continued for another 40 minutes. It covered the intelligence gathered from Emily's 14 hours of direct enemy observation, which turned out to be considerably more valuable than anyone had initially assessed. She had mapped 4 weapons cache locations, 2 communication relay points, the commander's behavioral pattern under pressure, and the structural weakness in the enemy's perimeter design that the drainage channel had exploited. All of it documented in the small field notebook she had kept in a sealed pocket of her jacket throughout the entire operation, written in the compressed notation system that she had developed over years of operational intelligence work, in which, when transcribed and analyzed by the unit's intelligence officer that afternoon, produced a targeting package that the unit had spent 3 months attempting to develop through conventional means. 3 months of conventional intelligence work, produced in 14 hours, by one person, alone on a mountain. The intelligence officer who transcribed the notebook said nothing for a long time when he finished. Then he walked down to Reyes' office and knocked on the door and said, Sir, I need you to look at this, and laid the transcription on the desk. Reyes read it. He read it twice. Then he called Ethan. Walker, he said, the notebook. Sir, when did you know she'd kept a field notebook through the entire operation? A pause on the line. When she gave it to the intel officer, sir, about an hour ago. She kept a targeting notebook for 14 hours under those conditions, and you didn't know about it. No, sir. Another pause. This one longer. Neither did she tell you, Reyes said. No, sir, she did not. He ended the call. He sat with the targeting package on his desk, and he thought about the nature of what he was looking at. Not just the intelligence value of it, though that was significant. The character it represented. The specific quality of a person who does the complete job, not the job required to survive, not the job required to rescue the team, but the full job, including the part that nobody will ever see if it doesn't come out of a sealed pocket of a field jacket 48 hours after the mission ends. The part that costs the most because it demands the most and offers the least immediate return. Emily Carter had kept that notebook because keeping it was the right thing to do. Not because she wanted credit for it, not because she knew it would matter to the debrief, because it was the work and the work was what she came to do. Reyes had been in this business for 28 years. He had met very few people who understood the work at that level. He was sitting with the evidence that he had been insufficiently attentive to one of them. He picked up the commendation recommendation that was sitting on his desk, waiting for his signature on the final copy. He read it through one more time. Then he picked up a pen and added 2 lines at the bottom in his own handwriting, which was not standard practice, and which he did not care about at this particular moment. The lines read, "This officer's performance is not an anomaly. It is the expression of a sustained, deeply trained capability that was present before this mission and will be present in every mission that follows. The question this unit must answer is not what Captain Carter proved. The question is what we intend to do with what we now know." He signed it, he sent it up the chain, and then he went to find Emily Carter. He found her in the corridor outside the medical wing, standing with her right hand in her jacket pocket and her left arm in the cast, and her eyes on the door at the end of the hall, which was the door to Holloway's recovery room. "He asked to see you," Reyes said. She turned. She hadn't heard him coming, which meant she was somewhere else in her head. Not far, but elsewhere. He noted that and filed it as one more piece of information about what the last 48 hours had cost her that she was not advertising. "I know," she said. "I was working up to it. Working up to seeing a patient you helped save. Working up to seeing a colleague who wasn't sure I should be on the mission," she said. "It's a different conversation." Reyes nodded. He understood that distinction. "Do you want me to?" "No," she said. "I'll go. Carter, she looked at him. For what it's worth, he said. I knew what I was putting in that unit when I assigned you. I knew the reception was going to be difficult, and I assigned you anyway because I believed the unit needed what you brought, and I believed you could handle the reception. He paused. I'm less certain now that handling it alone was the right expectation to set. She looked at him for a moment. I don't need it to have been easier, sir, she said. I just need the next person coming behind me to have a cleaner road. That's what the report does, he said. That's what the commendation does. That's what I intend to make sure the curriculum change does. She nodded. Good, she said simply. She turned and walked down the corridor to Holloway's room. She knocked twice. Come in, said a voice that was weaker than she remembered it and more present than she had feared it would be. She opened the door. James Holloway was in the hospital bed with tubes and monitors doing their quiet, competent work around him. His color was better than it had been in the helicopter, which was not saying much because in the helicopter he had been the color of old paper, but better was better, and she noted it as a positive data point. His wife, Karen, was in the chair next to the bed, a woman in her mid-30s with the specific expression of someone who has been sitting in a hospital chair since 0430, with the particular quality of attention that people deploy when the person in the bed is the central fact of their existence. Karen Holloway looked at Emily when she came in. Emily looked back. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Karen stood up and crossed the room and put her arms around Emily Carter with the full, unhesitating force of a woman who had been told in the hospital corridor at 0345 in the morning that the reason her husband was in that bed and not in the ground was standing in the corridor outside Holloway's room. Emily stood with Karen Holloway's arms around her, and she did not say anything, and she did not move for a moment. Then she put her right arm around Karen's back and held on because that was what the moment required. And because Emily Carter, underneath everything else she was and everything else she knew how to do, understood people at the level of what they needed, and what Karen Holloway needed right now was to hold on to the person who had kept her husband alive long enough to be saved. Thank you, Karen said against her shoulder. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Emily held her. He did the work, Emily said quietly. I just made sure the option was there. Karen pulled back and looked at her. Her eyes were red, not from crying in this moment, from hours of crying before this moment, and the particular redness of eyes that have been through everything and are now in the specific precarious territory of relief that still doesn't fully trust itself. James told me, she said. He told me what you did. He was conscious for most of it, Emily said. He remembers more than people would expect. He said you were the calmest person on the mountain. Emily looked at Holloway. Holloway was looking at her. I had lost weight in a visible way in the past 48 hours. The way people lose weight rapidly when the body is spending everything it has on survival. He looked stripped down, reduced to the essential version of himself. But his eyes were the same, the sharp, direct eyes of a man who had spent enough time looking at hard things to have stopped flinching at them. Captain Carter, he said. Holloway, pull up a chair. She looked around and found the second chair in the corner of the room. She pulled it to the side of the bed. She sat down. She put her right hand on her knee and her casted arm in her lap, and she looked at him with the same level directness she brought to everything. He looked at the cast. Cracked radius, she said before he could ask. I'm fine. When did it happen? About 3 hours into the separation. He was quiet for a moment. You ran a 16-hour operation with a cracked arm, he said. The arm wasn't the primary variable, she said. He looked at her. James, Karen said quietly from behind Emily. Yeah, he said, not to Karen, to himself, working something out. She could see him working it out, the specific visible process of a person confronting a gap between what they believed and what the evidence requires them to believe, and doing it honestly, which is harder than it sounds, because belief is not a thing that changes cleanly. It changes in stages with resistance, and the honesty of the process is what determines whether the change is real or just performed. I said things, he said, before the mission about you to Martinez. He paused. And other things in the ops center the day you arrived. I remember, she said. I was wrong, he said. Not wrong the way people are wrong when they say the wrong thing and mean the right thing. Wrong from the beginning. Wrong about what I was looking at. He held her gaze. You saved my life. You saved my team. And you did it while I was lying there with shrapnel in my side, which is the only reason I wasn't making it harder for you while you did it. It landed with a different kind of weight than Martinez's confession had. Because Holloway was not the young operator working through the first real test of his assumptions. Holloway was a veteran, a decade of service, a man whose opinion had structural weight in the unit because of who he was and how long he had been there, and how much the people around him deferred to his reading of things. His being wrong had cost something real, not just to Emily, to the mission, to the culture of the unit, to every interaction she had walked into for 3 days while carrying the knowledge that the people around her were looking for reasons rather than at evidence. She looked at him. She thought about what Ethan had said in the treatment room, about the record, about the next person who comes behind you. She thought about what she had told Reyes in the corridor, about not needing it to have been easier, about cleaner roads. "You're going to be in recovery for 6 weeks, she said. He blinked. "Yeah. When you come back," she said, "come back differently, not to me, to the room." She let that land. "To whoever comes in next, who you're not sure about before you've seen them. Come back with the question first instead of the answer." He looked at her for a long moment. "The question first," he repeated. "Yes." "What question?" "What can you do?" she said. "Not whether you belong." The room was very quiet. Karen Holloway was standing at the foot of the bed, with her arms crossed and her expression carrying the particular quality of a woman watching her husband encounter something important and choosing not to interfere with the encounter. Holloway looked at Emily for another long moment. Then he said, "Deal." One word, the same word she had used with Ethan. She recognized it, and it almost made her smile. "Get some rest," she said. "Your daughters are flying in tomorrow." He looked at her sharply. "How do you know that?" "Karen told me when I came in," she said. Karen made a sound behind her that was half laugh and half something else. Emily stood up. She tucked the chair back in the corner. She picked up her jacket from the hook near the door. She turned back to Holloway one more time. "For the record," she said, "you held on longer than most people could have. What Marcus did in the field kept you viable, but you kept yourself alive too." She met his eyes. "That's not nothing." He nodded. She left. In the corridor, she stood still for a moment. The weight of the last 24 hours was something she was still learning to carry in its new configuration. Not heavier than it had been on the mountain. Different. The weight on the mountain had been physical and tactical and immediate, the weight of specific decisions that had specific consequences that she could see and measure and adjust to. This weight was less measurable. The weight of having been seen. The weight of words that couldn't be taken back. The weight of a system that was beginning, however slowly and imperfectly, to make a correction that it should have made before she had to earn it in the hardest possible way. She had always known she could do the job. The mountain had not taught her that. What the mountain had taught her, what these 24 hours had taught her, was something more complicated. It was the discovery that being seen is different from being proven. That being acknowledged changes something in the landscape, even when you didn't need the acknowledgement to do the work. That the recognition of Ethan's voice saying you kept your promised lands in a different place in you than you expected it to, even when you are the kind of person who has trained yourself to work without it. She walked down the corridor. She pushed through the door at the end. Outside, the afternoon was ordinary, in the specific way that afternoons are ordinary after extraordinary nights. The sun was at the same angle, it was always at this hour. The air was the same temperature, it was always at this time of year. People were moving through the hospital parking lot, going about their specific individual purposes, and none of them knew anything about a canyon in northern Arizona, or a drainage channel, or 12 seconds on a ridge, and that was exactly right. Because the work she did existed in the spaces that ordinary life doesn't have to know about in order to continue being ordinary. Ethan was outside. He was standing with his jacket in his hand and his sleeves rolled up, which was as close to informal as she had ever seen him. And when she came through the door, he turned and looked at her with an expression that had something in it she hadn't seen on him before. Not professional, not commanding, just present. "How did it go?" he asked. "Good," she said. "He's going to be okay." "I meant with Holloway." She looked at him. "That was good too," she said. He nodded. They stood next to each other for a moment in the afternoon light without talking. It was not uncomfortable. It was the specific, comfortable silence of two people who have been through something together and have said what needed to be said and are now simply existing in the same space without needing to fill it. "Reyes is going to restructure the attachment protocol," Ethan said. New operators going into a unit get a standardized assessment period. Defined, transparent, same criteria for everyone. He told me, she said. He's also going to make the after-action report required reading for every team that goes through pre-deployment training. I know. Emily. He paused, using her name again. It was becoming less notable, which meant it was becoming natural, which was the right direction. Yeah. How are you actually doing? She thought about it. She had not been asked that question in the direct personal way that he was asking it since before the mission. She had been asked about her arm and her clearance status and her availability for the debrief. She had been asked about her operational decisions and her intelligence notes and her patrol timing assessments. She had been asked by Karen Holloway in the most genuine possible way for the thing that absolved her husband's survival. But not this, not the direct, untactical question about the interior condition of Emily Carter as a human being rather than as an operational asset. She took a breath. Tired, she said. Arm hurts. I'm glad everyone's alive. She paused. I'm going to need a few days before I can assess the rest of it. That's honest, he just said. I try to be. I know. He looked out at the parking lot. When you said it in the briefing, when everything fails, you won't need to believe in me, you'll only need to know I'm there. He stopped. Yeah. I thought it was the kind of thing people say. It wasn't, she said. No, he agreed, it wasn't. He turned to look at her. Where did it come from, that sentence? She was quiet for a moment. My first deployment, she said. There was a situation, different terrain, different team, similar structure, people who weren't sure about me, and a moment where things fell apart and a decision about whether to stay or pull back. She paused. I stayed, and it worked out. And afterward, the team leader said to me, he said, I didn't need to believe in you, you just needed to be there. And I thought about that for a long time. And I decided that the best thing I could say to any person who doubted me before they'd seen me work was exactly that. Don't believe in me. Just know I'm there. Ethan was quiet. Who was the team leader, he asked. She looked at him. You don't know him, she said. Okay. He retired 2 years ago. He was the first person who said it clearly out loud to my face in front of the team. She belongs here. She looked at the ground for a moment. I've been waiting to earn that again ever since. Ethan said nothing for a long moment. Then you've earned it. She looked at him. Not from me alone, he said. From every person who was in that canyon and on that helicopter and in that debrief room. From the record, from the curriculum, from whoever comes in behind you and finds the road a little cleaner. He held her gaze. You've earned it from all of them. The afternoon held the two of them in its ordinary light. Emily Carter looked at Ethan Walker, and she felt for the first time in 6 years the specific and particular feeling of a door opening in the right direction. Not thrown open, not dramatic, just moving, turning on its hinges, admitting something. When do we have another mission? She asked. He looked at her cast. 6 weeks minimum, he said. I'll be ready in 5. He started to say something about the case and about medical clearance and about what Reyes would and wouldn't authorize. She looked at him. He stopped. 5 weeks, he said. 4.5, she said. He almost laughed. It was very close to an actual laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere real. We'll see, he said. Yes, she said. We will. She picked up her jacket. She started toward the parking lot. She had 3 days of mandatory rest ahead of her and a follow-up appointment in 72 hours and 6 weeks of a cast that was going to require constant adaptation and a debrief follow-up report. She was going to write with her right hand until the left one was cleared. She had Holloway's recovery to track and Martinez's growth to watch, and Ethan's revised understanding of what his unit contained and could be. She had the commendation she hadn't needed, but was going to accept because it belonged to the record, and the record belonged to the next person coming through the door. She had all of it ahead of her. She had done the thing she came to do. She had been where she needed to be when it mattered. She had brought everyone home, not with glory and not with an audience, and not because anyone told her she could, but because that was the job, and the job was what she came to do, and she had never once needed permission to do it well. 3 days earlier, a 4-man SEAL team had been trapped in a canyon with no communications, 60 rounds of ammunition, 1 dying man, and no visible way out. The mission that was supposed to last 6 hours had become a fight for survival inside a trap that had been designed by professionals to be inescapable. And one person had looked at the inescapable trap and found the door. Not because she was extraordinary in the way that legends are extraordinary, remote and untouchable and built for a different world, but because she was extraordinary in the way that truly capable people are extraordinary, present, prepared, precise, and absolutely unwilling to leave someone behind. That was the whole story. That was the only story. A soldier went up a mountain. She did the job. She brought everyone home. And the mountain remembered every step she took on it, even after the rest of the world moved on.